In our lives, we all have those things that have made us who we are. Maybe it's our favorite family member. Maybe it's that memory of a favorite home cooked meal, that road trip, or perhaps sitting on the front row of the church pew on a Sunday morning. There is always something that has formed us at our deepest level. This week on Faithful Witness of Terrance Carroll, my friend Landon Mascareñaz drops by to talk about his spiritual autobiography. Recently, Landon, who grew up in a devoutly Catholic family, although he was not necessarily a practicing Catholic, just Catholic adjacent, became baptized and confirmed in the Catholic Church. Landon has found new faith in the Catholic Church. It's a growing phenomenon that we see young men joining the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. And when asked why, they point to the liturgy, the sense of being, the sense of connectedness, the structure of the church as a reason why they joined the church, joined the Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church to be more specific. We explore these questions with Landon this week. We also talk about the importance of his faith in informing how he shows up in the world and participates in the democratic marketplace. Landon recently founded Courageous Colorado, which is a nonprofit dedicated to encouraging us in Colorado to have courageous conversations about what does it mean for us to live together and work together for the common good. Welcome to this week's episode of Faithful Witness of Terrance Carroll. I'm Terrance Carroll, a pastor, theologian, ordained Baptist minister, lawyer, and former speaker of the Colorado House of Representatives. Faithful Witness is grounded in the prophetic witness of the Black church, and each week we explore the moral questions that shape our democracy, culture, and society. Welcome to this week's episode, and thanks for listening. My friend Landon Mascareñaz, and I hope I did the last name right. I think my Siri does a better job of saying your last name than I do. But this is my friend Landon, my buddy. Um, Landon is the CEO of Courageous Colorado, a brand new nonprofit in Colorado committed to civic engagement, democracy reform. But I'll allow him to talk about that more later. But Landon also recently became baptized and confirmed in the Roman Catholic Church. And we're going to talk about that story today, how he got there. And the interesting part is that Landon kind of grew up church adjacent. His family's Roman Catholic. I know his grandfather was a great influence in his life. He's also Roman Catholic. We just celebrated his transition unto glory, as we say in the Black Baptist Church. He folded up his tent on this side of the Jordan and crossed over the Jordan into eternal glory. I never got a chance to meet him, but I know him through Landon. So, Landon, welcome to the Faithful Witness with Terrance Carroll podcast. So, Landon, tell me about yourself, how you grew up, and trust me, everyone wants to hear this story because I never tire of hearing the story of Landon and his family.
Wow, that's a real big honor, Mr. Speaker. So first off, I want to say thank you for having me on. Thank you for all your work in voting rights, civil rights, education policy. You're a real man to admire and a real trailblazer in our state. And I am just tremendously lucky to call you a friend and someone I deeply admire, truly. And so to be on here talking about these big things, democracy, religion, love, connection, what we do with it, what does it make, how does it make sense in this crazy, complicated world? To me, that's the best stuff. Um, I was, my family's from New Mexico and Colorado for quite some time. My grandfather, who we just talked about, was born in northern New Mexico in a town called Springer, New Mexico, in the kind of Mora County area, which my family had been in for many hundreds of years. And then my grandparents met at CU Boulder My grandma was working at essentially the snack shop. My grandpa was going to get his undergrad there as a Mexican American man in the 1940s, thanks to the GI Bill and some money that my great grandfather saved up from working in the silver mines up in Leadville. He worked in the smelter. And there's a long, long, deep tradition in my family of devout Catholicism. And uh, when I was born, however, my father wanted me to make that choice myself, which I greatly admire and respect that they gave me that choice, which I know we can come back to. My career began on the Navajo Nation in New Mexico, teaching first grade. I ran Teach for America, New Mexico for 5 years. Went off, got my doctorate, came back to Colorado where I went to middle school and high school. That's actually where we got to meet for the very first time when I was working at Denver Public Schools. And then worked at A Plus Colorado, went to the Colorado Education Initiative, worked in the significant amount of rural education, economic development redesign, which has been incredible. And 3 years ago, I started working more in the democracy space because the through line, Mr. Speaker, through my entire career is how do we open up systems to the communities they serve? And that began on the Navajo Nation for me, and it really then comes now to my in my democracy journey and my faith journey as well.
I want to go back to this doctor thing. I don't know how I never knew that you're Dr. Landon. And so, what's your doctorate in? When did this all happen? Why don't any of us know? And I'm going to start a trend that we start calling you Dr. Landon.
You totally can do that. I left. I went to Harvard Graduate School of Education. Started in 2012. They had a program called the Doctorate in Education Leadership. Started that and completed it in 2015. And my third year of the program was a capstone residency at Denver Public Schools. That's actually how I got back to Denver after growing up here and leaving for 13 years. The residency of the EDLD program brought me back to work in the family engagement office and also in the new school development office. I was very fascinated by the intersection of democracy through new school development, family engagement, and the building of new public spaces.
That's interesting. I never knew that how you got back to Denver.
Yeah,
I have a cousin who has a doctorate from the same program at Harvard, and I
really.
have really, and I have my own Harvard hat because way back in 2000, I graduated from an executive leadership program
Oh
at
yeah,
the Harvard Divinity School for the
at the
Center
Divinity
for the
School.
Study of Values in Public Life, which is partly how I give myself credentials for being a public theologian. So we're both Harvard men, although I'm
Yes.
a Morehouse man first. So
Yeah. First
that's
and foremost.
first and foremost. Everybody knows first and foremost I'm a Morehouse man. But
Well,
I'm going to call you Dr. Landon.
you're
So
more than welcome to, Mr. Speaker. And I'll tell you, my program was really interesting because the first year they pick all your courses for you. They're like, this is what you're going to learn about. This is what you're going to work on. And the second year, they open up the entire Harvard campus to you. You can pick whatever class you want from another school. And the best class, the class that honestly was the peak of my Harvard experience, was a divinity school class. It was essentially the religious implications of journeys and myths. And actually, interestingly enough, that's kind of where a lot of my spiritual journey began in about 2013, 2014, when I was asking some really big questions of my life. I think I was coming to terms with my alcoholism. I'm a recovering alcoholic and starting to ask kind of questions around who am I and what's my commitment to other people and to God and to the cosmos, and started to find my way through some of these big questions in that divinity school class, where literally every week we read a different book about a journey or a quest and the religious implications of those liminal journeys.
let's use that as a pivot point. So recently, I think about 2 weeks ago
Yeah,
from this recording, you were baptized and confirmed, and you're now a fully incubated Catholic. And I don't have a
that's it.
better word for that, but we'll go fully incubated and
And you
birth
feel the
Catholic.
glow, the glow coming off.
You know, you're like one of those paintings that you see in church of the saints. There's a glow behind your head, and maybe other people can't see it right now, but I
You could see it.
actually see
If
the
you could see it,
Landon glow. I mean, I completely see the Landon glow, the Dr. Landon glow. So before we started, we were pre chatting, and one of the biggest news items over the last several weeks is this reporting that
right?
young men in your generation millennials, Gen Z are converting to Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy, and it's
Yeah.
various reasons. Um, uh, but one of the things that's coming out in the research when they talk to these young men is that they're looking for the structure. They like the liturgy. They like the tradition. So, going back to what you referenced earlier, 2012, 2013, 2014, you started your religious journey, your spiritual journey. Uh,
Yeah.
how did you get from there to what happened about 2 weeks ago?
Wow. It it's it's one of those things that if you were gonna go back in time and ask me that this is where I'd end up, I don't think I would have known that. I think I knew that I was going into a place where I had no map. Um, that I had to like leave all of the intellectualism aside for a period of my life and really go on a different type of instinct. I was meditating quite a bit. My meditations were pretty intense and really powerful, and I think I was starting to pay attention to them. Um, and along the way, I started getting really involved in ancestry work. And through the ancestry work, I began to understand the arc of my family in a way that I think many people aren't privileged to. I think this is one of the things that is powerful about having a family connected to the Roman Catholic Church is the record keeping is pretty outstanding. And I've been able to go back to pretty much the year 1000, maybe even a couple hundred years before that, to ancestors that lived in Portugal, that actually, even before they got to Portugal, were in variety of places in Western Europe, but found their way to Portugal pretty much before the Kingdom of Portugal was created. And I got to understand the arc of their journey and started to see my placement, Mr. Speaker, in that journey of over 1,000 years of what they said Mascareñas, or we say Mascareñas, or sometimes we say Mascarenas, this family line that began and moved across northeast Portugal to um, to journeys into Mexico, into New Mexico, and into Colorado and California. And through that, asking some really big questions around what was their journey? Then what does that call to me to understand about my potential journey in both a spiritual and physical way?
We've talked a lot in the past about faith and faith journeys and how it impacts public service and how we
Right.
show up in public life. One of the big fancy theological words is hermeneutical, how we interpret our role in public life. So, how does your faith influence and then provide an interpretive tool for how you engage in public life?
It's it's a thing that I'm just beginning to really ask and unfold in my own way, in my own authentic way. I mean, I think that the keystone part of your question is that I was starting to get more and more spiritual, more and more religious, and starting to see the connection between that spirituality, that insight, universal love as actually a foundation for being human, and universal love as a foundation for living in a democracy, which I know is something you're very passionate about, Mr. Speaker, and can run rings around me in terms of understanding the moral implications of democracy. But I think I started to see this through line of infinite love in the way the cosmos is arranged and in the way that we require that type of love to function in a full open democracy. And so the idea of the open heart and the open democracy to me are becoming more and more linked. And that infinite love is the fusion energy between the open heart and the open democracy. And I see God, the cosmos, goddesses, and I really have, as I've chosen my path into Catholicism through the death and promises of to my grandparents who passed away last year, but also to the social justice teachings of the priest, and I think recently the real inspiration of Pope Leo to name some really important truths and to confront some real big contradictions in the way that the world is being ran right now really speak to me. And so I see my move into Catholicism, my move into democracy building, as a kind of connection between the open heart, infinite love, and the open democracy.
So I take it you're on Team Leo, as many of us are on Team Leo. I've talked a lot about Pope Leo the last
Right.
couple of weeks on either one of my YouTube shorts or in some version in this podcast because when you listen to what Pope Leo has to say, and if I understand this notion of open heart as you define it, a lot of what he where he's coming from in his approach to the Iran war and dealing with this administration is this notion of open heart, which I take to mean that he sees the inherent worth and humanity in all of us as people who were created in the image of God.
Right.
Is that how you would kind of define your
Absolutely.
open heart and think about this?
Absolutely. The inherent dignity of all people, the right of all people to grow and to live their life, um, to achieve what they are hoping to do, to want that for their kids and to do it without fear of destruction, of death, of punishment, of living in a caste structure. And I think that that is a fundamental right that exists for, honestly, I wonder even for all living creatures, to be totally honest, I wonder that more and more as I get older. And I think I have found my way to see that in Catholicism in a way that I didn't used to see as a kid. You know, I think when I was a kid and younger, I used to see Catholicism as a reactionary force in the world. Um, and I've started to see it instead as a revolutionary force in the world. And that the great spiritual religious beliefs at their core are quite revolutionary. It is true when institutions surround them, often they take reactionary postures, and no institution ever touched by the hands of humans is perfect. And when I think about the teachings of Jesus and when I think about the teachings of many prophets, I think about revolutionary love and a revolutionary vision of human dignity. And I think Pope Leo is calling upon us to see ourselves in the Iranian people at a time when it's very easy to close down our hearts to people around the world.
And it's important to make the distinction. Loving the people is different than supporting a regime or the
Right.
policies of a regime because the people in the regime often are not one and the same. And
Right.
because it would be just as silly for someone to think of all of America is Trump.
Yes.
And that's far from the truth. But before we start talking about Courageous Colorado, I want to get back to your journey of, from not looking at the Catholic Church as reactionary and fundamentalist to something that's a force for good in the world and
Right.
more empowering from your perspective. Was there like something you read, something you heard? Was what started you to change your perspective on Catholicism?
The ancestry journey was a huge unlock for me. And it was an unlock in a few different ways. One was the realization that my ancestors were likely crypto Jews who escaped the New World from persecution from Catholics, but yet chose to become Catholics somewhere along the way in their time in Mexico and New Mexico. So I think I started to see the movement across faith as actually a part of the human experience that my ancestors were able to choose, even because maybe they had been persecuted by the very thing they came to choose. And I think there is something very powerful in that, that actually, my sense for a lot of people in this world and their ancestors can really resonate. I really struggled and wrestled with that. I think secondarily, I read a book that was very profound to me called Romans in the New World, and it's about a group of Catholic scholars and priests who fiercely fought Spanish colonization and Portuguese colonization of the New World and caused great debates in Spain and Portugal. And I think actually most people of the world need to know that this was, in many cases, the colonization of the New World was not authorized by the Spanish kingdom or the Portuguese monarchs in certain ways that it actually unfolded. And there was great debates inside the church about the atrocities that were committed. Now, maybe we could say they still happened, and so we don't take those debates seriously. But I look at America right now, 66% of people oppose the Iran war. 33% of Americans support it. Yet our policy of our country is to still conduct it. And I think it is a great reminder that nothing is monolithic or unitary. and that there are great debates inside these institutions, even when they decide to act a certain way. And I think I started to unlock my understanding of the power of the church as a force for good when I started to understand that it was not a unitary force and there were great debates inside of it, like all things over time.
I want to encourage our viewers to go back and look up this notion of crypto Jews, which doesn't mean cryptocurrency. And I just wanted to make sure that was clear to people. There's no cryptocurrency. They didn't leave Europe with
with
cryptocurrency.
with Dogecoin.
Yeah, a medieval crypto. That wasn't a thing. Uh, but go back and look at the history of the Spanish Inquisition, which is
Yes.
really where this term
Yes.
crypto
In the
Jew
Portuguese
came from.
Inquisition. Right.
Yeah, along the Iberian Peninsula, which is
Yes.
Portugal and Spain, and the Catholic Church engaged in an inquisition because they saw Jews as a threat to society that had to be rid of. And some Jews took on, without becoming Catholic at the time, took on Catholic practices and liturgy
Yes.
in order for their families to survive. And some of those families, over the course of history, actually became Catholic and found
Yeah.
themselves in the New World. Thus, they were crypto Jews as their origin story. So it's always interesting to hear these bits and pieces of history
Right.
and they run into folks like you and your family who are actually descendants of that history and
Right.
still living pieces of that history. So I just wanted to share that because that's actually an important piece of your history and an
It is.
important piece of the history of religion that is often overlooked.
I it was a profound thing to unlock for me and to understand a part of our journey. And I think even to take it one level deeper is that, would you say Abrahamic religion,
Abrahamic. Yeah.
Abrahamic religions, all three, likely in my family because they preceded the kind of reconquista of the Iberian Peninsula from the Islamic Caliphate of that time. My sense is there probably was intermarriage with that community as well. I mean, we had this sense that people were living in isolation, but they were so mixed and so connected. And just as my family came to the New World and likely intermarried with lots of indigenous people, and we're not fully Spanish or Mexican, but actually indigenous, that I began to see these things as less exclusive and unitary and more as convergence. And I think that's a big part of my religious philosophy now, Mr. Speaker, is that I find convergence through my ancestors' journey and through my journey, not to say this is the only way to believe or the only way to live, but actually an entry point into a set of universal experiences that I am just beginning to understand.
And another note for our listeners and viewers is that the Moorish people introduced Islam into the Iberian Peninsula,
Right.
and they were primarily dark-skinned Africans. Um, and I've always thought there was some brother in you, Landon, and now I know that it might be true. I was like, yeah, no, he got swag like your brother. And so now we know that it was like part of your ancestry DNA that got you there.
My Moorish brother energy from 1230.
Exactly. You and Hannibal.
1300.
You and Hannibal of Carthage. You might be distant relatives. So we have about 3 to 5 minutes left because you're a busy person and we have to get you onto busy Dr. Landon things. So let's talk about Courageous Colorado, what it is, what you're doing, how you developed it, and if there's a connection to your faith, how's your faith inform what you do?
About a year and a half ago now, it feels like, we were working on the campaign for 131, Mr. Speaker. And I know, that was a really exciting and very heady time to think that we could redesign democracy to take a big swing at depolarization, negative partisanship, and some of the major challenges facing this country. And around that time, I was asked by some of our colleagues and some funders to say, would you be interested in starting an organization that would carry the ball forward, whether we win or lose? And I said, absolutely. But my career and commitment is around open systems. And how do we work with communities and coalitions so that we know that the policies are co-created with people on the ground to build it forward? And that was a part of my kind of commitment to being involved in it. That's how it got started. The first initial tour around the state was last spring, about a year ago. My grandmother had actually just passed away. And, you know, in the aftermath of her passing, I think I was pondering a lot of big religious questions. And one of the things that I kept coming to was like the courage to get through this painful time in our family's life and the courage to move my grandpa back to Colorado where he grew up at 97. And I kept sitting down with people like you and Dick Wadhams and Amber McReynolds and these people I just deeply admire and asking them, what do we need in Colorado? And they said, we need more courage in our politics. And that we should put aside all the technical things like what is ranked choice voting or what is the open primary and like what's the real moral North Star? And that is courage. And currently, right now, courage is not incentivized in our political apparatus, our political machinery. The vital force moving through our politics is not incentivizing the vital force of courage. Sadly, there are still a lot of courageous people in politics. There's still a lot of great people in politics, but they almost have to defy that structure all the time. And we envision in Courageous Colorado a different type of political dynamic where they are actually encouraged by the political forces, whether that's things like ranked choice voting, open primaries, term limits, campaign finance reform, nonpartisan elections at the local level, changing election timing so that small groups of people aren't deciding every election. Um, and, we live in a really important time, a really consequential time. I have a lot of faith and spirituality in that. One of my favorite quotes from Emerson that it's my mantra pretty much every day says, accept the place divine providence has found for you, the society for contemporaries, the connection of the myths. And I believe that we were meant to be here at this moment in time and that we have a task ahead of us, which is to open up our democracy and to open up our hearts. And that's what we're seeking to do at Courageous Colorado. And that's how it connects to my faith.
Thank you. And my nonprofit is a partner with Courageous Colorado,
Right.
Faithful Witness for Democracy, where we seek to reclaim our nation's, moral and ethical roots as a democracy. And so it's been a pleasure to work with you and Courageous Colorado and all the work that you're doing and all the groups you have brought together a broad range of groups who are
Right.
involved in showing courage and how we show up in the public space and how we engage in a word that I'm kind of creating for my doctoral program called the American Democratic Marketplace. And how do we rediscover the American Democratic Covenant? And
Yes.
the work of Courageous is incredibly important in that. So, how do people find you? How do they get involved? Um, and all the things. Tell us where to find you.
Well, the first thing I would say that I believe that the work of faithful witness and the work that you're doing right now, Mr. Speaker, is so important because you are carving out a space that is necessary, needed, and critical, which is to make the claim and to advocate and to educate us all about the religious and moral foundations of our democratic covenant, of our American covenant. And I love that phrase. I love it so much. And I think it is time to renew that covenant. And I think it is actually a part of the great task of our time. And I know that you will be and are like a major leader and driver of that. So I'm so honored you're in our coalition. I'm honored to call you a friend. And I would say that um, we need everyone of all backgrounds, Republicans, Democrat, minor party, independent, everyone to come to the table because together we can do this. I believe it so deeply in my heart. Courageouscolorado.org. We have lots of events. We're working in towns and communities all over Colorado. We're working on state policy. We're working with local leaders. We're working with now a coalition of 40 organizations from across the political spectrum. Um, and I'll say the elephant in the room is that the both political parties are not that keen on what we're doing. And as a lifelong Democrat, I also would name that like I feel called to say that it's an opportunity for us all to come together across political backgrounds to challenge the orthodoxy that says to close down is the way instead of opening up to this moment.
Thanks, Landon. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing the work that Courageous Colorado is going to be doing throughout our state. Thank you for spending some time with us on this week's episode of Faithful Witness with Terrance Carroll. I hope you enjoyed our interview with my friend Landon Mascareñaz of Courageous Colorado and to hear his spiritual journey. As always, please take time to like, subscribe, hit the notify button, and continue to join us on the Faithful Witness with Terrance Carroll podcast. And remember to tell the truth, seek justice, love the people. This is Faithful Witness.